Awe, amicus. Welcome to Fixing the Minutemen Part 2. If you haven't watched Part 1, I recommend you check that out first. Part 1 covers the Minutemen's questline. This video will cover the ending of the game if the player has chosen the Minutemen route, and then a few changes I would have made. Before we begin, I'll note that some people take issue with always comparing Fallout 4 to New Vegas. The final act of this game specifically is very similar to the final act of New Vegas, and so comparisons between the two are all the more fitting here. I won't take the time in this video to break it down, but Fallout 4 copied New Vegas almost to a T with their factions. Fallout New Vegas also had better written factions, so I'll make all the comparisons I please. We will now go through the following quests in order. The first two quests have very little deviation between the Minutemen's path and the other factions. With this being said, they will be brief. Without further ado, let's look at what unique playthrough experience the Minutemen offer. The molecular level. The player brings the teleporter schematics from Virgil to Sturges. Sturges requests several parts that can be found at a number of locations. This quest has nothing unique for the Minutemen as far as I can tell. We make a teleporter and enter the Institute. Inside job. The player makes their way into the Institute. In my playthrough, Nate is firmly against the godless creation of artificial humans at the expense of real humans. Seriously, what the hell is the Institute's goal? Self-preservation while killing and replacing people? Or killing people and helping nobody for the sake of the people you're killing? Regardless, we shoot our son for the monster that he is and leave. Form ranks. The player informs Preston Garvey that the Minutemen are now enemies of the Institute. It's time for us to prepare our forces to confront the greatest threat in the Commonwealth. Now let's stop for just a moment before I spoil this quest. In case anyone watching has not completed a Minutemen playthrough, or more likely, you forgot what happens in the Minutemen playthrough, I'll take this moment to have you guess what the player will be doing to prepare your faction for war. Will we A. train the Minutemen we have to be better prepared to face the underground city of Terminators? B. Stockpile weapons and ammo to give our troops an advantage in the coming battle? Or C. Kill ghouls, super mutants, or raiders at a radiant location, and do this several times in fact? Now, I've tallied up your votes and the results are in. It may have been a dead giveaway because only one of these options is fucking asinine, but the player will in fact be doing more Radiant quests to prepare for the final battle. The player is told to help more settlements. The Brotherhood of Steel has the player building an admittedly stupid Optimus Prime robot, but at least they are actually preparing for war. Half of Fallout New Vegas is just preparing for the final confrontation. You are meeting with families on the Strip and militant organizations with the express goal of creating the best chance at winning the final confrontation. What do the Minutemen do? They send their leader to help some farms. What a joke. I've brainstormed a few alternative quests they could have given the player instead. The Minutemen could prepare for battle. Since none of our settlers are actual soldiers, it's unlikely they've had any real military training. We could have had a quest similar to the quest Flags of Our Foul-Ups from Fallout New Vegas. In this quest, the player could speak to an NCR officer at Camp Golf. He would tell us about a squad of underperforming misfits. The player would be given the option to train the squad and turn them into a skilled unit. This quest was dependent on the player's own knowledge of combat, directly tied to the skill level of guns and explosives. Fallout 4 did away with skill points. However, this quest could instead depend on the stars you have unlocked in any given weapon. Have the Minutemen create a firing line and practice shooting under guidance of their ex-military general. If the player is proficient with auto rifles, then give them auto rifles, or pistols, or heavy weapons, etc. Alternatively, since the gunplay is very good in Fallout 4, you could have the player shoot a number of targets within a certain time limit. If the player can complete this in time, maybe the troops join us at the Institute have better weaponry or something. If the player is not proficient with guns, or our settlers are lacking proper weapons, the player could travel to Diamond City Market and make a deal with Arturo. Arturo is the arms merchant in Diamond City for any who forgot. The general could make a deal with him for weaponry, and pay extra for him to travel to the castle and train the Minutemen in proper weapons handling. The Minutemen could have stolen weapons or armor from the Brotherhood of Steel. We could steal Brotherhood intel and find where they are moving their supplies. The Minutemen could lead a raid on a small outpost where a vertibird has landed to refuel. The player could be given the option to buy supplies, keeping peace with the Brotherhood, though it's unlikely they would sell anything to dirty wastelanders, or kill them and take it. This gives the faction at least some narrative reason for turning on the Brotherhood. If the player completed this, our Minutemen in the Institute could have power armor or heavy weaponry. Maybe the player is tasked with raiding a gunner caravan to supply the Minutemen. This caravan is transporting chests of combat armor and advanced weaponry. The player could track the caravan and lie in wait, ambushing the gunners on their way to Quincy. If the player failed to catch the caravan in time, they might have to storm the gunner outpost itself and reclaim the weapons that way. When the Minutemen attack the Institute, our forces could be armed and armored. Maybe if the player doesn't have enough settlers, they could enlist the help of mercenaries. Let's say you have 10 settlements or less, you could travel to Diamond City and find a mercenary in the Dugout Inn. If the player has enough caps, and it would need to be several thousand caps for a deal like this, they could pay the troops outright. Otherwise, the player could make a trade with the mercenaries. Maybe their leader wants a center of command, and we trade one of our settlements for aid in the battle. The settlement could then become a mercenary outpost, and Preston is unhappy with the general for trading land for soldiers. Maybe the general could form an alliance with the Brotherhood of Steel. We could trade some sort of advanced technology for troop support in the final battle. Maybe if the player agrees to purge ghouls or synths from their settlement, the Brotherhood would offer us air and ground support. Once again, Preston would bitch and moan about our choices, but we are the general, aren't we? Our settlers are not soldiers, even if they call themselves Minutemen. Filling that military void with outside conscripts is not unreasonable. I think it only would have added depth and weight to the decisions leading up to the final battle of this game. We must now return to the bleak reality of the Minutemen questline. Instead of arming or preparing our settlers to face robot war machines, the Minutemen have us sent to help more farmers. It just so happens several of the settlements I was sent to during this quest were half populated by children. Are these the ranks we are forming? What a disappointing faction. You prepare for the penultimate showdown with the antagonist of the game by doing the same exact quests as when you were a grunt with no title. I don't feel like my character has grown or integrated into this faction at all. To prepare for war, we are doing the same Radiant settlement quests. I really cannot put into words how boring this is. There is zero quest diversity with this faction. Defend the castle. The Institute attacks the castle. This quest is only triggered if the player becomes hostile to the Institute. I shot our son, father, immediately, so this quest will trigger after returning to Sanctuary. The Institute sends waves upon waves of synths and coursers to attack the castle. It is a very long and boring fight against copied enemies. The quantity is enough to pose a real challenge to any settlement's defenses. However, I would have increased the spawn time for the enemies. I spent too much time running to find more synths in my current playthrough. In my opinion, this quest was a poor excuse to give the player a 10-minute ammo dump and call it good enough. I was disappointed this quest didn't do anything new or interesting. It's just like when you're given an alert that a settlement is under attack by raiders or super mutants. The only notable difference is this quest has about 5 times the amount of enemies as a standard settlement quest. Really stop to think about that. This quest is just a dressed up defend X settlement from X attack. But don't be too disappointed, amicus. At least they did the exact same thing for the Brotherhood of Steel. Now let's take a look at that quest. With our powers combined. If the player has made enemies with the Brotherhood of Steel, the quest with our powers combined will begin. This quest's objective is to destroy the Brotherhood. Our main objective, given to us by Preston, big surprise, is to blow up the Brotherhood airship, the Pridwin. Once we talk to Preston, we will be tasked with building 5 artillery cannons at 5 settlements. Building 5 cannons at one settlement doesn't count. It must be 5 separate settlements with 1 artillery each. You can build more, but it will only count 1 artillery per settlement. This doesn't make any sense. If I build 10 artillery cannons at Nordhagen Beach, which is the nearest settlement to the Pridwin, the quest will not progress. If I build 5 cannons in 5 settlements on the opposite side of the Commonwealth, this quest will then count it. What? Why isn't the goal to simply have 5 artillery cannons built near the airship? I do not believe these mortars can shoot from Somerville Place or Sunshine Tidings Co-op all the way to the Boston airport. The proximity of these cannons is not taken into consideration whatsoever. It's just another example of Bethesda writing weird quest goals that don't make any sense. After we build our 5 artillery cannons, the Minutemen will wait for their general's word to attack. I guess this is a nice touch, but here at the very end of this quest line, this scrap of recognition from the faction we lead is barely worth mentioning. It is nice that the player is at least given the option to take out the Brotherhood of Steel. However, being able to wait until after the Institute has been destroyed seems like a weird choice to me. I'm not convinced it should have happened before the nuclear option, but having it take place after the fact makes the Minutemen seem even more tyrannical. Worse than any of this is that we gain nothing from doing this. Yes, we eliminate another faction, and that's always a great choice I would give to the player, but there is nothing more tangible behind it. Destroying a chapter of the Brotherhood should give the Minutemen some sort of bonus or prize for doing so. In Fallout New Vegas, we are told about the war between the Brotherhood of Steel and the New California Republic, following the events of Fallout 2. We never see this conflict, but we can see tangible signs of the NCR's victory. NCR heavy troops will be wearing modified power armor suits. Why couldn't the Minutemen have been given a similar reward? I would have given the Minutemen power armor after destroying the Brotherhood. It wouldn't have to be in your settlements. When the player fires a flare gun, maybe some of the Minutemen that come to your aid are wearing salvaged power armor with Minutemen paint and symbols. If the devs really wanted to go above and beyond, they could have created a new set of armor, similar to the Centurion armor from Fallout New Vegas. Not a whole power suit, but elements of it incorporated into their armor. Something to show the player that destroying another faction does something for your own faction. I actually stopped while writing this and did just that. I got a pencil and a pen, and I drew up an idea of what I was expecting late-game Minutemen soldiers to look like. Something that utilized armor already in the game, but with a unique Minutemen feel to it. The nuclear option. This quest will take the longest to break down, as it is the climax of Fallout 4's story. This is Fallout 4's battle for Hoover Dam. Everything the player has done was building up to this moment. This is where your faction choice should make a difference in the ending for your player. Let's go over how the Minutemen finish the main quest line. This quest, like the molecular level, is almost identical to the other factions. The second half of this quest is the exact same for the Brotherhood of Steel and the Railroad. The player enters the Institute with several soldiers from their given faction. The player will storm the Institute while the faction's de facto nerd stays to hijack the teleporter. More Skyrim flashbacks. The first half of the quest to kill the big bad is another generic dungeon. In Skyrim, it was more Draugr and skeletons in the glorified dungeon of Skuldafn. In Fallout 4, it's more ghouls and synths in the glorified dungeon, the basement of the Institute. The lack of creativity is impressive. We are sent into another dungeon, but this one has a twist. Half the pathways are water tunnels and there's a shit ton of radiation. What a unique and interesting choice for the most hyped event in Fallout 4. Finally taking the fight to the Institute in a high radiation dungeon. Exhilarating gameplay. I love creative and memorable choices. I've got to ask, why wouldn't the General use artillery to create a point of entry in the CIT courtyard, like the Brotherhood? Settlement artillery can destroy the Pridwin. I don't see why we couldn't have shelled the courtyard and led a ground assault that way. It would have been more cinematic to bomb the courtyard while our Minutemen assemble. We could have our player, the General, walk down lines of troops standing at attention. I'm not a fan of a voiced protagonist in Fallout, but I would have been hyped up if the General gave a war cry and led a charge of Minutemen into the pit. The player could have seen settlers from settlements you've helped in your army. Maybe the total number of settlers you have could determine how many soldiers join the attack. If the player was a poor general with few settlements, they would only be able to muster a small attack force. If the player had large and prosperous settlements, you could muster more soldiers for the attack. The unfortunate truth is the amount of settlements we have does not affect the number of Minutemen that attack the Institute with us. I believe more Minutemen spawn as we make our way through the Institute, but at the beginning I counted no more than 5. During the fight through the Institute, I never saw more than 5 Minutemen with Preston and myself. In Part 1, I mentioned how I had hoped that for the final quest, all of our settlers would band together as one army for the Minutemen. It stands to reason that the more settlements we have under our flag, the more soldiers we would be able to muster. This creates an incentive to have many settlements to give yourself more troops for the battle under CIT. However, from what I've seen and searched online, it seems there is no difference between having 5 settlements and 10 settlements, let alone having 10 settlements with 20 people each, or having 10 settlements with 2 people each. For my current playthrough to get this footage, I actually killed most of the settlers at the settlements I was sent to, which brings up another interesting point. The Minutemen let you fail upwards. I guess in our current world this is actually kind of realistic. I found it was faster to kill the settlers and build a radio beacon rather than run halfway across the map and clear whatever dungeon they sent me to. Preston seems to have no idea that I simply shoot all the settlers that need our help. It's actually not necessary to help them at all. You can just keep killing settlers. As long as the player completes the quests to clear a new spot for a settlement, you will progress the Minutemen questline. However, doing this, or helping each settlement you encounter as intended, has no change on the forces that will join you for the final quest. In Fallout New Vegas, the groups and settlements you helped throughout your playthrough would actually affect the final battle for Hoover Dam. Most notable is the Boomers, who, if you aided their settlement, would carpet bomb the approaching army before you face them. This is a substantial difference for players who helped the Boomers and for those who did not. You either receive a tangible bonus or you don't. The Brotherhood of Steel can also be aided and join in the assault. Same for the Enclave remnants, who can join with their vertibirds. Fallout New Vegas rewarded the player for putting effort into preparing for the final confrontation. Fallout 4 does no such thing. On a more subjective note, the Minutemen soldiers look lame as hell. Running into the Institute with a flannel and jeans and a shotgun is not imposing, nor does it make the player feel like you are leading any sort of militant organization. The real Minutemen in 1776 looked fly as fuck, but fashion was better then. Even if we take the time to give all of our settlers, the people who are supposed to make up the fighting force of this faction, if we give them all combat armor and heavy weaponry, we still receive the jean-clad generic Minutemen as help. Where are the soldiers I took time to arm and armor? Why aren't the soldiers I put on defense used in this quest? Once our player fights through the ghoul tunnels, we arrive at the same room we teleported to previously. And I have to ask, why is the terminal still here? Wouldn't they have locked it after we hijacked this spot to enter? Wouldn't they have anticipated another attack from us? We literally walk through the exact same spot as before. There are no guards at this terminal. Nothing has changed. No extra safety measures. No cameras that catch us and teleport an army of synths to our location. Why wouldn't the Institute just have a couple of mounted Gatling guns pointed to the teleport pad? They could have synths who, remember, don't need to sleep, guarding the doorway 24/7. If anything unwanted teleports into that tiny room, they could open fire. It would be like shooting fish in a barrel in a very real sense. But once again, the front door to the Institute is unguarded. Is it just me, or were there more synths that attacked the castle than there are synths defending the Institute? They can teleport, right? Why wouldn't there be hundreds? A dozen guards in the enemy's own base with teleporting soldiers. What? Don't tell me that since we defended the castle, we thinned their numbers this far. If that is the case, then, my God, this organization was a joke to begin with. A small nitpick. Father's body is still here in the doorway. Nobody found him? This means that Kid Sean, as well as anyone else using the front door of the Institute, must have awkwardly stepped over his body on their way in. Or was the body left to make sure the player had to see it again? I actually don't care. Let's move on. The player is tasked with fighting your way to the Institute's main reactor. The shaft is ray shielded, so you'll have to use proton torpedoes. Wait, no. Oh, we are given a bomb to place on the reactor. If the player had not killed Father, they would have been given an encounter with him on his deathbed. I hate Sean and the Institute, and this encounter has nothing to do with the Minutemen, so I'll skip it. In the room with Father, the player must access his terminal to open a door to the reactor. Here, the player is given the option to issue the evacuation order, giving the scientists and synths inside a chance to escape. This is one of the few morally dubious decisions in the game that the player makes. I appreciate this choice being given to the player. I do not appreciate Preston's bitchy reaction to the General's choices. After we fight through more tunnels of synths, we arrive at the high radiation reactor room. The player sticks a detonation charge on the main reactor and teleports back to the nerd on the console. Then, the player is forced to have an uncomfortable interaction with a robot of their son. You must interact with child Sean. Sturges will refuse to teleport the player out until you do. Just in case you needed to be reminded that you are not the leader of this faction, General. I have to take a moment to tear into this appalling choice by the writers and explain my viewpoint. I do not at all fall into the category of players that actually sympathize with the synths, especially now, when humanity is literally on the cusp of this being a reality with AI. Fallout 4's weird choice to give us our lost child kind of spoils the whole point of our son actually being an old man. This child only exists to pull a cheap reveal on the player when you arrive at the Institute. I find it kind of fucked up, to be honest. A creepy child robot that has been programmed to think the player is his father. To fill some sick role to the player of the original son you'd lost. If the player does accept this Sean as Sean, isn't that just pretending your real son never existed? If not, then it's still a very weird choice. It's even worse to have Preston Garvey react negatively to telling the robot to get lost. It's a fucking synthetic child, programmed like a baby bird to go mama, mama. I mean, it's a robot. Will he even grow up? Did they manufacture a maturing phase for this child? Is he fully developed, only stuck in a child's filter? Will he grow? Can he grow? Would the player have to find special technicians who could alter his body to go through teen and then adult phases? If it grows on its own, then how advanced is synth technology? And why doesn't the Minutemen use it for medicine or self-repairing walls and armor or something? I don't think the developers put any amount of time into these questions. I'd like to draw a parallel to vampire movies of all things, that frequently point out the negatives of creating a child vampire. The movie Interview with the Vampire delves into this moral conundrum very well. I see a child synth as the same thing, trapping a conscious mind, or what's possible of a conscious mind, in a child's body forever. Eventually it will question why it doesn't grow, and come to the realization that it never will. While all those around it age, it remains a child. It will yearn to grow up, but find itself incapable. It will inevitably grow bored of being a child, as its child brain has no choice but to mature, while its body does not. It's really a sick fate to give anybody, let alone to create it intentionally. For Father to even make something like this shows what a depraved psychopath our son was written as. Once the player has finished their forced reunion with fake Sean, they are teleported to the top of a building to detonate the Institute. This is the dumbest fucking decision our player could possibly make. Why aren't we given the option to take the building? All three factions destroy the Institute, and it doesn't make any sense for one of them to do it. especially not the Brotherhood, but this video is about the Minutemen. Why wouldn't we take the Institute and use it? It's an underground Garden of Eden. Why wouldn't we? They are developing better genes of food and resources. The Minutemen wouldn't want that. The Institute has the power to save the Commonwealth and transform it into a healthy land again. The Institute is essentially a giant geck, and we blow it up. Imagine all the settlements the player could help if they had access to the Institute technology. I guess that none of that agriculture, medicine, or weaponry is useful to a bunch of starving farmers with pipe pistols. We stormed their base and captured it. We have it. We won. There are no more synths teleporting in. We are victorious. Why then must we put a charge in it and leave to detonate it? Why not hold the Institute and use its resources to actually help the Commonwealth? The decision to just blow it up so that we can have an epic cinematic mushroom cloud is beyond asinine. Not to mention the radiation and shrapnel and debris and other problems that explosion would have caused. Not like it's right next to Diamond City or anything. The end of the Minutemen. This fully concludes the questline for the Minutemen. Their questline was completed after Old Guns, and the main questline is completed through them in the nuclear level. That's it. Let's do a brief recap of the Minutemen faction from start to finish. We rescue a group of refugees from a gang of raiders in Concord. They move into our old neighborhood and ask for the player's help. Their leader gives the player the title General, even if you kill the settlers he sent you to help. After several Radiant quests, the player is told it's time to retake the castle. The player retakes the castle with the Minutemen. The player meets Renegade Minuteman Ronnie Shaw and unlocks artillery. The faction then stalls until the player reaches the molecular level quest and build a teleporter with the Minutemen. The faction then stalls indefinitely until the player becomes hostile with the Institute. The castle is attacked by synths. The player is sent out to complete more Radiant quests. If the player becomes hostile with the Brotherhood, they build 5 artillery cannons and survive another attack on the castle. Finally, the player enlists the Minutemen to help blow up the Institute. If you look on the wiki, it will have 9 quests listed in the Minutemen questline. 2 of these quests are just more Radiant quests given a unique name. Instead of Raider Troubles at County Crossing, it's The First Step or Form Ranks. These don't deserve to have unique names. There is nothing unique about them. I could draw that statement back, given the player cannot complete Forming Ranks without having finished the quest Old Guns. However, this is less about the quest itself and rather the developers ensuring you have the ability to kill the Brotherhood before you can enter the final act of the game. If we take out the quests that do nothing unique, those being named quests that are simply helping/defending a settlement, we are left with 3 unique quests exclusively for the Minutemen as a whole. These quests are When Freedom Calls, Taking Independence, and Old Guns. I cannot express how disappointing this is. This faction has 3 unique quests. Every other quest is a dressed-up Radiant settlement quest, or the exact same quest as the other 2 factions. If it is not apparent by now, the Minutemen have a shamefully small amount of quests in their quest line. This faction had the most room to tell its own story. They just didn't give it one. So how could they have been improved? To improve the Minutemen, I would first establish an actual goal, restoring the Minutemen. Currently, this means running around the map killing ghouls and super mutants. I would have written quests that actually involved the Minutemen. The player is informed of other groups in the Commonwealth. The group we meet in Concord was just those who survived the Quincy Massacre. The other groups are still out there. I would have the player go find these groups and enlist their help. Maybe these groups are currently inhabiting settlements. We could have had several settlements built up as mini bases, and here the player could find remnants of the old Minutemen. Just because they didn't make an appearance for the betrayal and massacre in Quincy doesn't mean these groups were evil. I don't know why they're framed as being so evil. The Minutemen once again don't seem to understand how strong of a drive self-preservation is. This may shock you, but most people don't want to die in battle if they don't have to, even if they call themselves Minutemen. If tensions were already high in the faction, and you heard on the radio, "Help, we've been betrayed, we are being slaughtered," it is not unreasonable for the remaining militia groups to sit it out for their own sake. And especially with the word betrayal in the air, who could trust this call for help wasn't a trap itself? It is unreasonable that these groups are nowhere to be found in the Commonwealth. The player meets and recruits Ronnie Shaw. I would have had the player sent to find the old leaders of the Minutemen and recruit them as well. If we implemented my local leader idea from the settlement video, we could appoint these colonels and lieutenants as local leaders. I would have reserved the title of general until after the castle had been retaken. This would be a much more fitting time to raise the player's rank. Once you have powered up the transmitter, the Minutemen's influence is now able to cover the breadth of the Commonwealth. At this point, they would need a central leader, not when they are one settlement big in the corner of the map. Once the Minutemen have the radio transmitter, I would make the castle the center of command instead of Preston. The castle is said to be the Minutemen's center of command, yet we never have to return there except to defend from synths and Brotherhood attacks. Preston Garvey effectively functions as the center of command for the Minutemen, and this is silly. I would have the player instead receive alerts on their Pip-Boy about potential settlements. Or the player could tune into Radio Freedom and hear the quests this way. A Minuteman could say something like, "Good day, General. Our scouts have found a potential area for a settlement. If you find it suitable, radio in, and we'll send troops to occupy it. Stay safe out there, General." Something as small as this would create a tangible change after the castle has been retaken. I think it would only increase immersion. Ronnie Shaw returns to the castle, but nobody else. I would have had renegade groups of older Minutemen return to the castle. This could open up a myriad of quest ideas. Perhaps they lay claim to the title General, and the player must decide what to do. Hand over the faction to veteran Minutemen, brand them as traitors and kill them, or convince them to stay and work under your Minutemen regime. The Minutemen never returned to Quincy. I know there is currently some half-baked Creation Club quest for this. However, paid mods are not the same as the $40 game Fallout 4 that I am critiquing, and so I will not acknowledge this user-made quest. I would have had the Minutemen gather in force and destroy the Gunners. Once again, I'd reference Fallout New Vegas. Nearby Camp McCarran, the Fiends have made their home. This is very similar to the Gunners, being an unjoinable raider faction. The Fiends have several leaders the player can kill: Cook, Driver Neffy, and Violet, serve as pseudo-lieutenants, while Motor Runner is their leader. By killing these individuals, the population of fiends outside Vegas will diminish. NPCs around the world will comment on how the area became safer as the raiders dwindled. And the end slides tell us how, due to the loss of their leaders, the gang would be exterminated by the NCR. I don't know why Fallout 4 put so much focus on the Gunners, and yet gave the player no means of actually combating this faction. The Minutemen specifically have a serious grudge with the Gunners, but no quests in their questline address this. I would have made the Minutemen exclusive. As of right now, they function as the Yes Man ending for Fallout 4, with all of Preston's merry band being unkillable, so the player can always use them to complete the game. You could keep this aspect, but for God's sake, we should not be allowed to serve the Institute while being a Brotherhood paladin, while being the general of the Minutemen. Once the player begins working with the Institute, the evil bad guys who are kidnapping and replacing people with fake versions of themselves, the Minutemen should depose the player as the general. There is no conceivable way, unless Preston is a synth, the Minutemen would allow their general to be under the thumb of the greatest evil in the Commonwealth. And one final change involving the ending slides. I think most people found these slides to be bland and forgettable. I, of course, would want slides like Fallout New Vegas that show tangible effects the player's choices have on the wasteland. I understand being able to play the game indefinitely after the final quest kind of locks us out of a portion of ending slides. Since Bethesda would never put in the work to actually implement those changes to the world based on the player's actions and then let us continue to play, that would simply be too much work for them. However, ending slides pertaining to the factions we've killed or the state of the settlements would have gone into great lengths to make the player's choices feel unique. Diamond City, Bunker Hill, the Institute, Good Neighbor, and maybe even the Gunners could have all been mentioned in the final slides. If the player followed the Minutemen quest lines, I would be interested to hear how that made a notable difference on the Commonwealth. Maybe the Gunners mention living in fear of the Minutemen now, with their men-at-arms spread across the whole of the Commonwealth. Perhaps the Brotherhood comments on how the Minutemen serve the people in a way they could not, or alternatively how the Minutemen have become a tyrannical militia with unrivaled control of half of the population. If the player has helped Bunker Hill, they could mention how trade has improved and roads are safer under the Minutemen's rule. Good Neighbor could be forced to allow Minutemen to implement restrictions or surveillance of their chemtrades. Diamond City could be forced to give executive powers over to the Minutemen if ever they should be attacked. Since they allowed a synth mayor to take control, perhaps maybe now the Minutemen replace Diamond City security and appoint their own leader to Diamond City. It could even be someone like Ronnie Shaw. I think that would be a really interesting change to make. Institute scientists could mention how the Minutemen achieved what the Institute had hoped to, by helping the Commonwealth and improving the lives of everyone in it. This concludes my critique and fixing of the Minutemen faction. They had the most room to grow into their own interesting organization, but they squandered this opportunity on mindless kill quests. They had the best opportunity to integrate settlements into their faction in a meaningful way, but they squandered this on kill quests. They had the most potential to use this player-led faction as a vehicle for the player to write their own story of the general of the Commonwealth, but they squandered this on kill quests. The only good karma faction that let you be the leader in Fallout 4 gave you nothing to lead and nowhere to lead it. I firmly believe that if we, the players and fans of Fallout games, do not point out terrible writing in these games, then we can't expect anything better to come from future Fallout installments. Thank you for watching, and Wale, amicus.